Good morning, everyone. At least for most of you, it's morning. We're going to look at the Magi here just for a few minutes. At the time of Jesus' birth, there were two major empires. The Persian Empire, or sometimes called the Parthian Empire, and the Roman Empire. And these two empires were clashing on a regular basis. The Persian Empire was counseled by a class of what they called Magi, wise men. And they were very influential in the court of the Persians. As a matter of fact, if there wasn't a specific heir for the kingdom, these Magi were the ones who would appoint the king. Now, they came to visit Jesus, of course, but how in the world did these Magi know that a Messiah was to be born in Bethlehem, in Israel? Well, it all starts back in 590 BC when the Babylonians came, destroyed Jerusalem, and defeated the kingdom of Judah, and took back to Babylon the brightest and best of Judah. And we know of four of those, of course, Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. The Babylonians took these guys back to Babylon to train them to be these wise men. They took men from all over captured countries and brought them back, and then they would school them in astrology, mathematics, and so forth. And the top ones, these guys had an opportunity to become one of these wise men or Magi. And we know from Daniel chapter 2 that Daniel became the chief Magi in all of Babylon. And because he lived a long time, we don't know how old, but he had to be very old. He lived through not only the Babylonian Empire, but he was there during the Persian Empire as well. The Persians defeated the Babylonians. I don't want to get into that. But he lived into that as well and was counseling in the Persian Empire as well. Now, the Magi would have known about the Messiah, about Jesus, from the Old Testament, from the writings of Daniel. They were familiar with these writings. The wise men were familiar with all the major religions of the world. And the prophet Daniel had prophesied. In Daniel chapter 9, you can read it yourself, Daniel prophesied that the Messiah would be born 483 years after the temple was rebuilt. So when the remnant came back after 70 years, right, and they started building the temple, when they laid that foundation, Jesus would be born 483 years later, and that's exactly what happened. So they were familiar with that. And I'm sure they were familiar with Isaiah 9, where Isaiah said, "For a child will be born to us, a son will be given to us, and a government will rest upon his shoulders. His name will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Eternal Father, Prince of Peace. He will be the head of governments, and he'll be on the throne of David," and so on and so forth. Now, there's all kinds of theories about how these Magi were alerted to the birth of Jesus, and one of them is that Israel was associated with the constellation Pisces. So at that time, there was a bright star, or there's another theory that Jupiter came in line with a star or another planet, and it appeared very bright in the constellation of Pisces. And an interesting thing, you guys, is that on December 21st, from the 16th to the 26th, I believe, 16th to 22nd, somewhere in there, Jupiter and Saturn are going to align together the first time since 1226, March 4th, 1226. It's been 800 years. And supposedly when these two planets come together, there's going to be a bright, what it looked like, bright star in the sky. And it may be that at the end of this year, we'll see a star similar to what the Magi saw. So I don't know about you, but I'm going to be looking for it, okay? Guys, whatever it was, whatever these Magi saw in the sky, it really impacted them because they traveled 1,000 miles, took them 3 or 4 months to get to Jerusalem. And these were important men, so they would have traveled with this large entourage, about 300 soldiers we figure, servants, cooks, people to set up tents. So you can imagine when this big group of people, this entourage from the Persian Empire, showed up in Jerusalem, it would have caused a stir, a big stir. One of the things that has always impressed me about these Magi was they were truth seekers, truth seekers. Now, most honest people, at some point in their life, will come to a point where they'll be confronted with the futility of life. Life is pointless if the only reason why you exist is to make money, fame, and so forth. It's very selfish, and I think most people figure that out at some point. I contend that an honest search for truth will always bring a person to this baby born in Bethlehem. Always. An honest search will always bring someone to the Bible, the Word of God, this baby born in Bethlehem. They might try every other religion, they may try every other philosophy that they can run across, but ultimately, sooner or later, they're going to be confronted with this baby born in Bethlehem. These Magi challenge me to be truth seekers. They went through a lot to find the truth, and that's the kind of person I want to be. Another thing interesting quickly about these Magi is in Matthew it says that after an angel warned them, they went, that Herod wanted to kill baby Jesus. It says they went a different way. And isn't that true of you and me? When we became Christians, and especially those of us who became Christian when we were older in our life, as soon as we became a Christian, God put us on a different path. We left that church, we left that encounter, and we started walking a different way and experiencing life a totally different way. But that's not the end of the journey. Just like these Magi, they went home a different way, but that was only the beginning of the journey. It was 3 or 4 months to get back, and in our own life, there's going to be hardship, setbacks, loss, problems, and so forth. Anyway, these Magi at Christmas remind me, challenge me to be a seeker after God. That God has a plan for my life, God has a plan for this church, God has a plan for your life, and so often if we just seek His Word, pray, God will show us what that is. So there it is for today. I guess the big message, the big challenge for us is to be seekers after God like these Magi. God bless you. Until tomorrow.